The upper opening to the cavern of the fog was now so far above him that he had to strain to see it, and that warmth which had been there was gone. A dank chill wrapped him here, dampened the holds to which he clung until he was afraid of slipping, while the murmur of the water grew louder until its slap slap sounded within arm's distance. His boot toe skidded from a niche. Shann fought to hold on with numbed fingers. The other foot went. He swung by his hands, kicking vainly to regain a measure of footing. Then his arms could no longer support him, and he cried out as he fell. Water closed about him with an icy shock which for a moment paralyzed him. He flailed out, fighting the flood to get his head above the surface where he could gasp in precious gulps of air. There was a current here, a swiftly running one. Shann remembered the one which had carried him into that cavern in which the Warlockians had their strange dwelling. Although there were no clusters of crystals in this tunnel to supply him with light, the Terran began to nourish a faint hope that he was again in that same stream, that those light crystals would appear, and that he might eventually return to the starting point of this meaningless journey. As he strove only to keep his head above water, hearing a splashing behind him, he called out, "Thorvald!" "Lantee?" The answer came back at once. The splashing grew louder as the other swam to catch up. Shann swallowed a mouthful of water lapping against his chin. The taste was brackish, but not entirely salt, and though it stung his lips, the liquid relieved a measure of his thirst. Only no glowing crystals appeared to stud these walls, and Shann's hope that they were on the way to the cavern of the island faded. The current grew swifter, and he had to fight to keep his head above water, his tired body reacting sluggishly to commands. The murmur of the racing flood droned louder in his ears, or was that sound the same? He could no longer be sure. Shann only knew that it was close to impossible to snatch the necessary breath as he was rolled over and over in the hurrying flood. In the end, he was ejected into blazing, blinding light, into a suffocation of wild water, as a bullet in an ancient Terran rifle might have been fired at no specific target. Gasping, beaten, more than half drowned, Shann was plummeted by waves, literally driven up on a rocky surface which skinned his body cruelly. He lay there, his arms moving feebly, until he contrived to raise himself in time to be retchingly sick. Somehow he crawled on a few feet further before he subsided again, blinded by the light, flinching from the heat of the rocks on which he lay, but unable to do more for himself. His first coherent thought was that this speculation concerning the reality of this experience was at last resolved. This could not possibly be an hallucination. At least this particular sequence of events was not, and he was still hazily considering that when a hand fell on his shoulder, fingers biting into his raw flesh. Shann snarled, rolled over on his side. Thorvald, water dripping from his rags, or rather steaming from them, his shaggy hair plastered to his skull, sat there. "You all right?" Shann sat up in turn, shielding his smarting eyes. He was bruised, battered, badly enough, but he could claim no major injuries. "I think so. Where are we?" Thorvald's lips stretched across his teeth in what was more a grimace than a smile. "Right off the map. Any map I know. Take a look." They were on a scrap of beach which was more like a reef, for it lacked any covering comparable to sand, except for some cupfuls of coarse gravel locked in rock depressions. Rocks, red as the rust of dried blood, rose in fantastic water-sculptured shapes around the small semi-level space they had somehow won. The space was V-shaped, washed by equal streams on either side of the prong of rock by water which spouted from the face of a sheer cliff not too far away, with force enough to spray several feet beyond its exit point. Shann, seeing that and guessing at its significance, drew a deep breath and heard the ghost of an answering chuckle from his companion. "Yes, that's where we came from out, boy. Like to make a return trip?" Shann shook his head and then wished that he had not so rashly made that move, for the world swung in a dizzy whirl. Things had happened too fast. For the moment it was enough that they were out of the underground waves, back under the amber sky, feeling the bite of Warlock's sun. Steadying his head with both hands, Shann turned slowly to survey what might lie at their backs. The water poured by on either side suggested that they were again on an island. Warlock, he thought gloomily, seemed to be for Terrans a succession of islands, all hard to escape. The tangle of rocks did not encourage any exploration. Just gazing at them added to his weariness. They rose, tier by tier, to a ragged crown against the sky. Shann continued to sit staring at them. "To climb that." His voice trailed into the silence of complete discouragement. "You climb or swim," Thorvald stated, but Shann noted the survey officer was not in a hurry to make either move. Nowhere in that wilderness of rock was there the least relieving bit of purple foliage, nor did any clack-clacks or leather-headed birds tour the sky over their heads. Shann's thirst might have been partially assuaged, but his hunger remained, and it was that need which forced him at last into action. The barren heights promised nothing in the way of food, but remembering the harvest the wolverines had taken from under the rocks along the river, he got to his feet and lurched out on the reef which had been their salvation, hunting some pool which might hold an edible captive or two. So it was that Shann made the discovery of a possible path consisting of a ledge running toward the other end of the island, if this were an island where they had taken refuge. The spray of the water drenched that way, feeding small pools in the uneven surface, and strips of yellow weed trailed in slimy ribbons back below the surface of the waves. He called to Thorvald and gestured to his spine, and then close together, linking hands when the going became hazardous, the men followed the path. Twice they made finds in the pools, finned or clawed grotesque creatures which they killed and ate, wolfing down the few fragments of odd-tasting flesh. Then in a small crevice, which could hardly be dignified by the designation of cave, Thorvald chanced upon a quite exciting discovery: a clutch of 4 greenish eggs, each as large as his doubled fist. Their outer covering was more like tough membrane than true shell, and the Terrans worried it open with difficulty. Shann shut his eyes, trying not to think of what he mouthed as he sucked his share dry. At least that semi-liquid stayed put in his middle, though he expected disastrous results from the experiment. More than a little hardened by this piece of luck, they kept on, though the ledge changed from a reasonably level surface to a series of rising unequal steps, drawing them away from the water. At long last they came to the end of that path. Shann leaned back against a convenient spur of rock. "Company," he alerted Thorvald. The survey officer joined him to share an outcrop of rock from which they were provided with an excellent view of the scene below, and it was a scene to hold their full attention. That soft sweep of sand which had floored the cavern of the fog lay here also, a gray-blue carpet sloping gently out of the sea. For Shann had no doubt that the far stretch of water before them was the Western Ocean, walling the beach on either side and extending well out into the water, so that the furthest piles were awash except for their crowns were pillars of stone, shaped with the same finish as that slab which had provided them a ladder of escape. And because of the regularity of their spacing, Shann did not believe them works of nature.